In this video, we're going to continue learning about Flask. So topics for today are we're going to review CS50 IDE, we're going to review a little bit about Flask, we're also going to review a little bit about Python, and we are also going to work on Activity 3. Alright, so just a quick overview again of the CS50 IDE. So a couple things. First off, the website is ide.cs50.io, and we use GitHub for their login credentials, and that will allow you to log into CS50 IDE. So to create a new file, you would click on the green circle for new file, and that's where you'll write your Python code. So just note to yourself that the red circle at the top of the file means that you haven't saved your file just yet. Make sure you save your file before you run it. All right, now to save your file, you can do it a couple of different ways. You could use the menu system, so you could do File, Save As. On a PC, you could also do Control S, or on a Mac, you could do Command S, and make sure you save your file. In this example, I said to save your file as hello.py. And then on the right hand side, if you've set it up this way, open up a new terminal. So again, click on the green circle and new terminal. And the terminal is where you execute commands. So in this example, you would type in python space hello.py, and that would execute your Python file. So just to note some terminology, the $sign is a symbol that is commonly used to indicate the command line. And what it means is that the rest of the line after to the right of the $sign is a command. So in this video and in this course, in this camp, we're going to be working with Flask. So the way to run Flask is to issue the command flask run. So a little bit different from issuing the command Python file name. To run Flask, you just type the command flask run. Also to note in the CS50 IDE, to download your file, tap on the file and click on download. So on a PC, you would right click. On a Mac, you would two-finger tap, and on a Chromebook, I believe you also do a two-finger tap to get that menu. All right, so happy coding. So a quick review of Flask. As we've worked with before, Flask is a micro framework, which is a set of code that allows us to build programs without writing shared or repeated code over and over again. Flask is written in Python and is a set of libraries of code that we can use to write a web server in Python. I also include the official website link to Flask in case you're interested in reading more about it. Flask uses the MVC or Model View Controller. And a minimal Flask application looks something like this. Don't worry about all the details right now. We'll get the hang of it soon. All right, so in your home directory, create a file named application.py. And to run your Flask program, you just type in flask run, and then you click on the URL. Now to demonstrate this really quickly, I typed out a version of that application.py file over there. The only difference is now it says, hello, Mr. Chang. And here in the terminal on the right-hand side, I'm just going to type in flask run. Again, if all goes well, you'll get a link over here to click on. So you tap on it, it opens up a new window, a little pop-up window that says open. And again, if all goes well, you should get a message of your return statement over here. In my case, it's hello, Mr. Chang. All right, so next we'll review conditionals in Python again. So conditional statements perform different computations or actions depending on whether a Boolean condition evaluates to true or false. So just think to yourself when you're making decisions. Every day you make a lot of decisions. If it was raining outside, if that was true, you would take an umbrella. Otherwise, you wouldn't. A relational operator determines whether a specific relationship exists between two values. So relational operators, most of which you've seen already in math class. We've got less than, we've got less than equal to, we've got greater than, we've got greater than or equal to. To test for equality is a little bit different than in math. The test for equality is equal, equal, and not equal is the exclamation point and equal. Now just note to yourself there are no spaces between any of these relational operators, so be careful when you're using them. So a Boolean expression tests if the conditional statement is true or false. And some examples of Boolean expressions using a relational operator. In my case here, I have two variables. I've got x and I've got y. So an example Boolean expression could be x less than y, x less than or equal to y, x greater than y, x greater than or equal to y, x equal y, which means that is x equal to y, and x exclamation point equal y, which means that x not equal to y. So one of the key insights of code that Guido van Rossum, the creator of Python, had was that code is read much more often than it is written. So that's why Python uses indentation, unlike other programming languages. And just to note for yourself, in other programming languages which do not have indentation, you could actually write all of your code on one line. They actually have things like obfuscated contests, obfuscated code contests, where you try to write all of your code on one line, and people have to try to figure out what exactly your code is trying to do. This is exactly the opposite of what Python's philosophy is. And so again, Python is trying to force you to write readable code. So with the if statements, which is what we're going to look at first with our conditional statements, a code block starts with an indentation and ends with the first unindented line. Now also note to yourself, a code block can contain one or more statements. The amount of indentation is up to you, but it must be consistent throughout the block. Generally, 4 spaces are used for indentation and is preferred over tabs. So an example of how the if statement works is you would have some code before, then you would have your if, you do have your conditional statements. So for example, if x then less than f, if x less than y, just remember there's a colon at the end of the if, and then after that you would have an indented block of code. Could be one line, could be more than one line, and you would have more code there. And lastly, you typically would do something afterwards, and that line of code would be unindented. So it would be in the same indentation level as your original if. So another version is an if-else. So in other words, if something is true, it would do something, but if that conditional statement was false, it would go to the else part. Now, good programming practice, you would always have an else. That way, in case that conditional statement is not true, you would have some indication that it was false. So sometimes there are more than 2 possibilities, and so then we need more than 2 branches. So one way to express a computation like that is called a chained conditional. So in Python, this is something called an elif statement. And elif stands for else if. So Python's trying to save you couple of characters when you're typing, and so they've combined the words else if into elif. Alright, so the way that works, you would first start off with your if, and then you would have another elif, which again is kind of like a shorthand for else if, and then you might have an else afterwards. So just think to yourself, only one branch will run in that conditional block. There are no limits on the number of elif statements that you might have, and if there's an else clause, it has to be at the very end, but there doesn't have to be one. So just like you could just have an if by itself, you don't necessarily have to have an else after you have an if and an elif. Alright, so now I'm moving on to activity 3, what I'd like you to do. So I'm going to demonstrate this a little bit. So I want you to create a new directory called activity 3. And to do that, you would go over to your terminal. I'm going to exit out of my Flask run here. I'm going to type clear to clear my screen. And you would type in make directory activity 3. Then to go into activity 3, into that directory, just type in cd activity 3. Alright, so again, to note, if you're successful with getting into the activity 3 directory, your prompt will look something like this, as we've seen. Next up, I want you to create a file named application.py. And to make your life a little bit easier, I've actually put the code, I've given you some starter code on our website, advancedpython.net. So just go ahead and click on that link there, and you'll see the code right over here. Go ahead and click on the copy button, which is right over here. So just copy that code there, and then go back into your CS50 IDE. Click on new file, like this, and then go ahead and paste that code there. Now after you've pasted that code there, go ahead and click on File, Save As. Make sure you tap into the Activity 3 directory. I actually tapped too fast, so it did this, but that's okay. I'm just going to rename this file here to application.py. Alright, I'm just going to do this one more time, just because I didn't mean for that to happen the way it did, but sometimes things happen like that. Let me just close that off. I'm going to delete this. So I'm just deleting that there. And let me just try this again. So again, new file. We're going to paste the code in here. Then we're going to do File Save As. And I'm going to tap. Actually, first I'll do this a little better. I'm going to rename the file application.py. Then I'm going to tap into activity 3. And then I'm going to click on Save. And then that works the way that I want it to. Now in the terminal, I want you to type in Flask run. And when you do that, if all goes well, you should have something that says, welcome to activity 3. All right, so the problem that I'd like you to work on, and I've already, let me just point this out here in our code, is I've already this time added import random. So if you think back yesterday, I asked you to do this yourself. This time I actually put it in for you, just to make your life a little easier. So what I'd like you to do is to simulate playing a dice game and use the random number generator to do that. So again, just to recap from yesterday, the syntax to generate a random number is random.randint, and then you have the starting number and the stopping number. So for example, if you wanted to generate a random number from 1 to 6, you would type in random.randint 1, 6. Alright, so in your index function, I want you to generate a random number from 1 to 6 to generate or simulate a dice roll. And then I want you to return on your web page a picture of a dice roll. So for example, if the if when you went to the web page and the random number that was generated was 1, you might draw something like this. Now again, to make your life a little easy here, I'm going to move my head a little bit. There you go. That was fun. Maybe I'll move my head around for a second. Okay, I'll go up here. All right, great. Look at that, my head just moves. All right, so to generate that picture from the previous slide, use this source code. So I'll just explain a little bit. I'm incorporating some HTML in there, which we will learn more about throughout this camp. So we've got the BR tag. BR tag just stands for break. That skips a line. I've got some hyphens in there, and then I've got that pipe. Pipe is kind of like that vertical line there. Now, ampersand MBSP semicolon just stands for a space. So it just kind of adds a space in there. Then I've got the circle as if it were like a die. And then I added another space, a pipe, a BR, and some more hyphens to achieve that die looking like this over here. So go ahead and do that. And again, simulate that for rolling the dice from 1 to 6. So in other words, you're going to first generate a random number between 1 and 6, and then depending on what is rolled, I want you to draw the appropriate dice. Now, the kind of challenge that I came up with part A is how would you roll 2 dice and print the total of the roll? Okay, so think about how that would work. You know, one of the advice I always have is you've learned about variables. Variables are your friend. Create as many variables as you want, as you need to figure out this problem. All right, part 2 of activity 3 is, I know that many of you were unable to complete this yesterday, so I just wanted to do this again today. I want you to create wacky sentences using lists. So just to recap again, lists are a container that stores a sequence of values. The syntax for creating a list is a variable name, assignment, and the pair of open and close brackets. So it kind of looks like this. So in this example, we've got numbers equal bracket 32, comma 14, comma 15, comma 10, comma 2. And that's creating a list of numbers. And those are just numbers that I happen to pick. So some terminology that goes along with lists. Each value in a list is called an element. And each element of the list has an index value. So the index value in Python, index values start with 0. All right, so what I want you to do in this activity, in part B of the activity, is create a list of words. So for example, words equal bracket, and here I just have some words, just some random words that I came up with. We've got me, it, and you, and because they're strings, I have them in quotations, pair of quotations, and you end it with a closed bracket. You end your list with a closed bracket. All right, now, to make things fun, you can again use the random function, and you can, to pick out something random from a list, you can do random.choice. So random.choice will just pull out a random element of the list. And so I give an example here. I have secret equal random.choice words. So this again will pick out a random word from the list. All right, what I want you to do, similar to what you've done previously, is create a list of words for each part of speech. So for example, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. And then I want you to generate some random sentences. Alrighty, so that's about it for today's video. Good luck coding. I'll see you in class.